Welcome back. Now, there's been mixed reaction to the release of yesterday's fourth quarter crime statistics by Minister of Police Bheki Cele. The stats reflect that there was a countrywide 3.4% increase in murder between January and March this year. And firearms are the most used instrument, with 842 used in KwaZulu-Natal, followed by Gauteng with 727 and 2,629 nationally. Now, Minister Bheki Cele said that the decision to intensify visible policing in all provinces is working and that more financial resources would be allocated to combat murder and other contact crimes. So to talk more about this, we are joined virtually by Adele Kirsten, Director of Gun Free South Africa. Adele, always good to speak to you. Thanks for availing yourself this morning. Welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina.
So, Adele, firstly, let's just get your reaction first off to the release of the crime stats yesterday. What did you make of where we find ourselves as a country?
A number of things. One is, again, not surprising. We've seen throughout the last three quarters a steady increase in murder and in gun-related murders, and with the gun being the most frequently used weapon. I think the other important thing to note is that the causative factors are overwhelmingly interpersonal arguments, and that's then where you begin to see that when you bring a gun into that situation, the outcome is usually lethal. I think it's important we now also where we can look year on year, so we can compare the 2022-2023 stats with the last year. So we've gone a full year, and what we're seeing now is that we have 71 murders on average every single day, with 31 of those being gun-related. So that's the picture for the entire year. 31 people are shot and killed in this country every single day. That is a huge number and an enormous challenge to reduce that number.
It certainly is. And, I think it's something that most of us, are not surprised at, even though it's such a shocking statistic. And I suppose the reason why we're not surprised is because South Africans are victims of gun-related violence on a daily basis. Whether you're being held up, whether someone gets shot, and, all of us have had an encounter of one sort or another in this way, I would imagine, if not directly, then by extension through family members. But if we look at the fourth quarter crime stats that were released yesterday, Adele, Minister Bheki Cele said that more financial resources will be allocated to combat murder and other contact crimes. Now, given what was said last year, the resources made available, do you see this happening and making a serious dent in our current situation?
Sakina, if the allocation of resources means that there's going to be a prioritization of reducing murder and a clear strategy on how to do that, then yes, that's a very good thing. And I think if SAPS prioritizes reducing murder, that would go a long way. If there's a significant reduction in our murder numbers in the next quarter, that would go a long way to begin to build confidence in SAPS that they're able to help reduce crime, but also to make us feel safer. So Gun Free is glad to hear that they're prioritizing murder. I think that's really important. We would like to hear something like that they're also setting up specialist firearms units, because if guns are the biggest contributor to murder, then reducing and removing guns from circulation, reducing the availability of guns becomes a key strategy to reduce murder overall.
But is there a strategy to deal with that, Adele? Because you look at some of the worrying trends that are developing, because something we're seeing now is mass shootings. You know, every weekend, whether it's in the Western Cape, KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng, it doesn't matter. You know, you hear of these mass shootings. 8 people here, 5 people there, you know, 7 people at a go, house parties, wherever it may be. And you know, this is something that seems to be entering into that phase where it seems to be becoming a trend. But as gun-free South Africa, how are you tackling this issue of illegal firearms being used in criminal activities? In terms of addressing it with authorities, you know, what are you hearing there?
Well, the one is we have consistently over the last number of years put pressure on government to establish specialist firearms unit. And this is not just a call coming from Gun-Free South Africa. It's coming from communities, even the trade unions, SAPU are calling for it. And at a cabinet meeting in March, it was mentioned that this was going to be a priority. So there seems to be a commitment to establishing these units. What needs to happen, I guess, next steps is taking the public into their confidence and reporting on where these units are operating and what impact they're having. So that's critical to bring the public into your confidence to say, this is where we've established these units. These are the number of guns that are being recovered and removed from crime scenes, but also these are the guns that are being found. So in many of these mass shootings, those guns have not been recovered. And it's really critical to recover the guns for 2 reasons. One is you reduce the circulation. These guns move from one hand to the other. You have to take them out of circulation, and that has to be a priority of SABC. But secondly, once you've recovered them, you need to determine where they come from. Because as you know, there's a big debate of, are civilians the biggest source of loss and theft of guns, or are SABC? They both are sources of legal guns moving into the illegal market. But we need to understand, where did these guns come from? And then that helps us move again what we call further upstream, which is then to cut off the supply. So it's an integrated, holistic approach to understanding the entire cycle of how guns move from the legal to the illegal market. And you have to have a dual strategy where you recover the existing guns moving in the illegal market, and then you turn off the supply, you turn off the tap. And one of the things that can help do that is to strengthen our gun law.
Well, you know, Adele, if you look at those stats, the illegal possession of firearms and ammunition has seen an increase of 4.8%, and that represents a total of 241. But again, do we have a handle on the numbers? Do we know how many illegal firearms are in circulation? And perhaps we could take a moment just to reflect on, what do we mean by illegal firearms and ammunition at this stage?
So what illegal guns mean is that they are no longer in the legal system. So they've been lost or stolen or traded. And that means that we don't know how many guns are in circulation because they've moved out of the legal system. And so we are unable to measure where these guns are and how many are circulating. However, most countries that have guns have a central firearms registry, some kind of database that enables the state to determine who's got what guns at what particular point, whether it's official institutions, civilians, the private security industry. And so therefore your legal system of control becomes critical to helping you understand how many legal guns are there in the system, what is the loss and theft. That will give you some idea of weapons that have moved into the illegal market. But essentially, we don't know how many weapons are in the illegal market, and no one does, no country can measure that, which is why there's such a strong emphasis on putting in place really strong, efficient firearms control across the chain from the point of manufacture all the way through to destruction. Sakina, the thing about the recovery of illegal weapons is quite a tricky number to analyze, because it can mean two things. It can mean that there are more weapons moving into the illegal market. It can also mean that SAPs are improving their recovery rates. So it's often not a useful number to tell you what's actually happening. It could be good news and it can be bad news, but it does need to be reported, and it's more looking at, this is where you need a much longer trend line to help you understand what's really happening specifically around the recovery of weapons.
So Adele, I know Gun Free SA has been doing quite a lot of work here, in all aspects in trying to assist the police and, of course, the country as a whole with, gun control and all sorts of matters around this officially. Now, in February, Gun Free SA gave an official notice that class action proceedings were to be instituted against the South African Police Services, and this, of course, on behalf of affected families for deaths and injuries resulting from some failed police-controlled firearms management systems. So what's the update on that case? Because it is a very interesting one.
Sakina, we lodged our papers for certification in the Western Cape High Court on the 9th of May and had a public launch on the 10th of May here in Cape Town with the 9 families that have joined the class action. So what that means is we are asking the court to determine whether our case has merit and whether we can proceed to trial. In order to do that, papers are then served on the National Minister of Police, the National Police Commissioner, and all 9 provincial commissioners. We have what's called a return of service, which means that we know that they have received our papers. They are busy looking at the papers, and the next step now is that they need to do a responding affidavit. And they have several months to do that. So the next step now is to wait for their papers to be lodged in the High Court. We expect that they will oppose our attempt to certify the class, but that's down the road. We now have to wait for their response at this stage.
And we'll be watching with keen interest as well. Adele Kirsten, thank you so much. Adele Kirsten is the director of Gun Free South Africa, talking to us about the impact of illegal guns after the fourth quarter crime stats showed an increase in murder and, of course, the use of illegal firearms nationally. Let us know your thoughts as well at Morning Live SABC.